Hey everybody, Connor Boyack here, and as we head into the 2019 legislative session, we want to take a moment and briefly share with you 5 of the big issues that we're going to be working on this session. For the 2 or 3 of you who aren't familiar with what civil asset forfeiture is, this is literally the ability of the government to take ownership of your property without convicting you of a crime. So legit innocent people can have their property taken. As most of you know, we've been working on this for years. We actually filed what's called an amicus brief, or friend of the court brief, in the Utah Supreme Court earlier this year in a case dealing with a guy who had hundreds of thousands of dollars taken, never charged with a crime in connection with that at all. And the state officers, law enforcement, tried to circumvent the protections that were in place in the law in order to hand the case over to the federal government. Well, why would they do that? Well, in part, it's because under federal law, when you forfeit money, 80% of the revenue goes back to the seizing law enforcement agency. So there's a profit motive, there's an incentive to transfer these issues to court. So this person's attorney fought back. We filed that case in that brief in the case as well. And the Utah Supreme Court ruled earlier this year unanimously in favor of the property owner, or in other words, in favor of the forfeiture law and against the state for what it had done. So during this legislative session, we're going to be working on legislation with Senator Todd Weiler, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. And largely what that bill is going to do is incorporate what the court said and add some additional clarifications and protections, but we're going to take the opportunity to also go in and add some other tweaks as well. So you'll be learning more about that in the weeks to come. I know a lot of you are very passionate about this issue. Last time it polled, 86% of Utahns, I believe, object to civil asset forfeiture. So this is an issue that we work on closely, and you're going to be hearing more about it in the session to come. Another hot issue that we're going to be working on deals with what's called the third-party doctrine. And this deals with a case from the Supreme Court as well, except in this case it was the U.S. Supreme Court, not the Utah Supreme Court, where the justices, a majority of them, ruled this year in the Carpenter case that you and I have the right to privacy in our cell phone location information. In other words, your phone is tracking everywhere you go. The federal government was trying to make an argument that we don't have the right to privacy because a third party has that data. Your cell phone provider has it. This is decades old precedent at the court saying that when you give your property, your information to a third party, that you have less of a presumption of privacy and therefore they don't need a warrant to get it. Well, as you probably understand, the problem with this is that everything that we have in our phones really is going through a third party. Your, Snapchat, your calendar events, your banking information, your notes, sensitive information. And just because we're storing it in the cloud doesn't mean that we don't expect it to be private, right? So we're going to be working on legislation to ensure that you and I have a presumption of privacy in information that's held by a third party. Maybe you're uploading something to Dropbox, maybe it's on your phone. That's private. And if the government wants to be able to get it, they need a warrant. That's all that what we're doing is trying to say. That's fairly reasonable. And a committee actually favorably passed the bill unanimously, as I recall, earlier this year. So we're very excited by this bill. A related thing I'll plug before I move on to item number 3 is we're going to be working on a bill that says that law enforcement cannot force you to give them access to your phone using your fingerprint or using your facial scan, right? A lot of us have phones now that we can unlock that way. And just like they can't demand your password, they shouldn't be able to hold your phone up in front of your face and say, hey, look here, and thereby gain access to your phone without having to decrypt it themselves, get a warrant, and so forth. So look for that one as well. This tax is probably going to be the most ridiculous one you've ever heard about it, and a lot of people don't know about it unless you've owned a business. It's been around since the pioneer days, since before Utah even became a state. This is what's called the tangible personal property tax. It applies to businesses, and literally what it means is that if you're a business owner and you buy a couch, a desk, a computer, a chair, a phone, not only are you paying sales tax on it when you buy it, you literally have to pay property taxes on it every single year. You have to count up and keep track of all this junk that you've bought over the years, depreciate it on all these different depreciation schedules, report in every year how much tax you owe year after year for stuff you already bought long ago and paid for. It's absurd. and we're going to try and get rid of it. We're going to repeal it. The problem is it's in the Utah Constitution. So we're going to be running legislation or proposing rather, legislation for the legislature to consider that will just try and get rid of this. The issue is that it's in the Utah's Constitution, so it has to be a constitutional amendment. It has to pass the legislature by 2/3 in the House and the Senate, and then it will go to the public where you'll have the opportunity, hopefully, to vote for it on the November 2020 ballot. So this is important for small business owners. Yeah, they're paying a lot of money for this tax. It's actually about $220 million a year statewide for all businesses. But the biggest problem is the compliance. Think if you're a business owner and the amount of time you have to spend actively going through and tracking all your property and counting it up and keeping track of what you bought and when you bought it so you know when to start depreciating it. The compliance burden is significant. And that's the biggest challenge that business owners face, is the wasted time and energy having to deal with this tax. And so we're going to try and get rid of it, bring tax relief, especially to small businesses who need it. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about this as the session wraps up. So earlier this year, I did a little experiment. I had to get my deviated septum fixed for my nose, and I wanted to experience what it would be like as an ignorant consumer going through the healthcare system. So I never asked my doctor what the cost would be. I was never told what it would be. I was led beginning to end without any discussion of price, any encouragement to shop around. None of that ever came up. At no point did they even mention any cost, any estimate, any financial impact at all. So then the bill came. And yes, I mean, I'm insured, but at the end of the day, I have a high deductible. I had to pay for the entire thing out of pocket. And it was a significant sum, more so than had I shopped around and gone elsewhere. But this was important to me to understand what this process is like when you're doing these bigger operations and procedures. It was astounding and very eye-opening that at no point, there's no incentives for your doctor to talk to you about money. Oftentimes the doctors don't even have a clue themselves what it will cost to provide you the services that they do. And I think to myself, how ridiculous is that? You don't go buy a car or get your car worked on or go buy a book or whatever it is without understanding what its financial impact will be on you. When it comes to our bodies, why do we not know this basic information, and why are there no market incentives to lower the price by allowing you to go shop around and pit doctors against one another and say, well, hey, he was going to do it for $3,000. If you match that price, then I'll go with you. Why can't we do that? So we're going to start dabbling with that. There's actually a number of legislators who are interested in healthcare price transparency. It's a big issue. It's got a lot of moving parts. This is going to be a difficult thing to tackle, but we're very interested. We're going to be working on that in the session to come, alongside several legislators, to see what we as a state can do within this world of complex healthcare problems more broadly. So we've got a few ideas that we're cooking up and hope to share some of those with you in the weeks ahead. For several years, we've been working on policies connected to disruptive innovation. In other words, new businesses trying to compete with established players and facing protectionist regulations and high-powered lobbyists who are trying to bend the law in their favor to shut out the competition. And this is connected to the companies that we all know and love, right? You've got Uber and Lyft and Airbnb and Zenefits. You have companies in Utah like Neighbor, where it's like Airbnb but for storage in your home, and they're facing the same stuff. This happens time and time again, right? And we've been in the thick of a lot of these battles. And there's a new one. There's an app called Turo, T-U-R-O, and there's competitors as well. These guys are in the business of, basically it's Airbnb for your car, where you can share your car, rent it with two, another person, and they can use it for a day, a week, or whatever. And this app facilitates it. It's insured, and it's kind of a fun way to go rent a car directly from other people. Just basically borrow the car for a day and give them some money in return. Of course, the existing rental car companies don't really like this model, and especially not the airport, which is heavily subsidized by these rental car companies who pay a lot of money to have favorable location and privilege within the airport. And so now that you have Turo drivers, and before them Uber and Lyft, coming to the airport and chipping away at some of that protectionist cabal, they're not happy about it. And there's actually a big battle right now. People in Utah are being prosecuted for sharing their car at the airport using Turo. We're aware of at least 3 active cases of prosecution right now, Class B misdemeanors, that we're looking into. We've gotten some body cam footage that we're going to be sharing, And this is a big problem. Imagine you're a tourist coming into Utah and you walk out and your first encounter is with a cop who is there to write up this guy whose car you're borrowing, and you have to sit there for an hour as he goes through. It's like, that's not the welcome mat I think we want to be opening up as a state, especially one that likes to pride itself for, you know, business-friendly atmosphere and free market and so forth. So we're going to be working on this issue, making sure that disruptive innovation is allowed to flourish, that we can have healthy competition, and that these protectionist systems cannot overregulate and prohibit the activities of the free market. Obviously, this is just 5 of the 40 or 50 issues that we're going to be promoting and pushing in the upcoming legislative session. I encourage you to follow us on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Libertas Institute. Make sure you're checking out our website, where as the session gets closer, we'll be doing detailed write-ups. We're going to have our legislative tracker that we do every year so that you can focus in on the bills that matter to you by category, and you can track their progress. Very handy way for you to stay up to speed during the rapid pace 45-day legislative session. So lots of hot issues. This is just a small sampling, but we're going to be doing our best to keep you updated along the way. Feel free to reach out with questions, and let's get through this legislative session together.